the Library of Alexandria. Just saying the name conjures images of a magnificent building, holding all the knowledge of the ancient world. Scrolls upon scrolls, filled with philosophy, science, poetry, and history. And then, in a single, catastrophic fire, it was all gone. A tragic loss, a bonfire of human genius. It's a powerful story, one we've been told for centuries. But what if I told you that story isn't entirely true? The real fate of the great Library of Alexandria is far more complex, and in some ways, even more tragic, than the simple legend of a fire. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of myth and discover what really happened to the greatest collection of knowledge in antiquity. To understand the library's end, we first have to understand its beginning. Our story starts not with a fire, but with a vision. After the death of Alexander the Great, his vast empire was carved up by his generals. Egypt fell to Ptolemy, the first Soter, who established a new Greek dynasty in the land of the pharaohs. He wanted his new capital, Alexandria, to be more than just a center of power. He wanted it to be the intellectual heart of the world, inspired by Aristotle's Lyceum in Athens. The Ptolemies created something unprecedented, the Mouseion, or the Shrine of the Muses. This wasn't just a library. It was a state-funded research institute. It had lecture halls, observatories, dissection rooms, botanical gardens, and living quarters for scholars. And at its heart was the legendary library. The Ptolemies were obsessed with collecting knowledge. They sent agents across the known world to buy scrolls. They even passed a law that any ship docking in Alexandria's harbor had to surrender its books. The scrolls were then professionally copied by scribes at the Mouseion. The original was kept for the library, and the copy was returned to the owner. Through these aggressive, and sometimes ruthless, methods, the collection grew to an estimated 500,000 scrolls. This was the internet of the ancient world, a central hub for information. The scholars who worked there were the rock stars of their day. Think of Eratosthenes, the man who calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy, using just a stick and his own brilliant mind. He was the head librarian, or Aristarchus of Samos, who first proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, putting the sun at the center, nearly 2,000 years before Copernicus. There was Euclid, the father of geometry, whose textbook was used for over 2 millennia, and Hero of Alexandria, who invented the first steam engine. These weren't just dusty academics. They were pioneers, pushing the boundaries of human understanding, and it was all happening right there, at the Mouseion in Alexandria. The library wasn't just storing knowledge, it was creating it. So, if this place was so important, so central to the ancient world, how could it possibly disappear? This is where the story gets messy, and where we have to start separating fact from fiction. The first major suspect in our historical whodunit is none other than Julius Caesar. In 48 BC, Caesar found himself in Alexandria, embroiled in a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. During a battle in the harbor, Caesar's men set fire to the enemy's ships. According to some ancient writers, like the philosopher Seneca, the flames spread from the docks and consumed the library. This is the origin of the Great Fire story. It's dramatic, it's tidy, and it has a famous culprit. The problem is, it's probably not true. While the fire definitely happened, most contemporary accounts suggest it destroyed warehouses near the port, which may have contained some scrolls intended for export or storage. But there's no mention of the great library itself being burned down. In fact, the geographer Strabo was working in Alexandria, decades after Caesar's visit, and described the Mouseion as if it were still a fully functioning institution. So, if Caesar didn't deliver the fatal blow, who did? The timeline of the library's decline is long and slow, a death by 1,000 cuts, rather than a single dramatic blaze. After the Romans took control of Egypt, the golden age of the Mouseion began to fade. The generous royal patronage that had funded the research and acquisitions under the Ptolemies dried up. Roman emperors had less interest in bankrolling a foreign think tank. The intellectual center of the world was slowly shifting towards Rome itself. This led to a brain drain. Scholars left Alexandria for better opportunities elsewhere. The budget cuts meant fewer new scrolls were acquired, and the existing ones began to deteriorate. Remember, these were papyrus scrolls, a fragile medium that requires constant care and recopying to survive in a humid climate. Without adequate funding and a dedicated staff, the collection would have slowly rotted away. Then came periods of intense civil unrest. Alexandria was a volatile city, a melting pot of Egyptians, Greeks, Jews, and Romans, and tensions often boiled over into violence. In the 3rd century AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian attacked the city to crush a rebellion. His forces destroyed the Bruchian district, the royal quarter where the main library was located. This conflict almost certainly damaged or destroyed what was left of the original great building and its remaining scrolls. It wasn't a targeted attack on knowledge, but the library was a casualty of war. After this destruction, a daughter library located at the Temple of Serapis, known as the Serapeum, became the main intellectual center of the city. This is where the final, tragic chapter of our story unfolds. By the late 4th century AD, the Roman Empire had become officially Christian. A new kind of zealotry was taking hold, one that was intolerant of paganism and its temples. In 391 AD, Theophilus, the bishop of Alexandria, led a mob of Christians who, with the emperor's permission, destroyed the pagan temple of Serapis. The Serapeum, and the library within it, were torn down. This event is often conflated with the burning of the Great Library, but it was a separate, and much later, act of destruction. It represented the final nail in the coffin for Alexandria's legacy as a bastion of classical, pagan learning. The era of open inquiry that the Mouseion represented was over, replaced by an age of religious dogma. So, who destroyed the Library of Alexandria? The answer is, everyone and no one. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow, painful process of decline that spanned centuries. It began with budget cuts and neglect, was accelerated by civil war and political instability, and was finished off by religious fanaticism. The simple story of a single great fire is a myth, a convenient fable that gives us a single person or event to blame. The reality is much more sobering. The library died because society stopped valuing it. They stopped funding it. They stopped protecting it. And eventually, they actively destroyed what was left of it. But here's a final crucial point. The loss, while immense, might not have been as absolute as we imagine. The Library of Alexandria was the greatest, but it wasn't the only library in the ancient world. Great collections existed in places like Pergamum, Antioch, and Rome. Scholars constantly traveled and copied important texts, while many unique works were undoubtedly lost forever. Much of the core knowledge, the Euclid, the Plato, the Homer, was preserved in other locations. The knowledge wasn't erased in a single night, it was scattered. Furthermore, after the fall of Rome in the West, it was the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, in cities like Baghdad and Cordoba, who took up the mantle. They actively sought out and translated the great Greek works of science, medicine, and philosophy into Arabic. They didn't just preserve this knowledge, they built upon it, making their own monumental contributions. Much of what we know about ancient Greece today comes to us not directly, but through these Arabic translations, which were later reintroduced to Europe during the Renaissance. So, in a way, the spirit of the Library of Alexandria never truly died. It was passed on, like a torch, from culture to culture. The story of the Library of Alexandria isn't just about a lost building. It's a cautionary tale about how fragile knowledge can be, and how easily a society can lose its intellectual treasures when it succumbs to neglect, conflict, and intolerance. It reminds us that libraries and institutions of learning aren't just buildings. They are ecosystems that require constant nourishment and protection. The fire that truly destroyed the library wasn't one of wood and papyrus, but one of apathy and extremism. And that S a lesson that is just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you enjoy uncovering the truth behind the legends, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. We have many more stories to tell. Thanks for watching.